Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. As usual, if you aren't already subscribed, please feel free to do so. I would greatly appreciate it. And also, if you have any suggestions or comments or any questions about what you would like to see next or anything in general, feel free to let me know down in the comment section down below. I do get back to you guys as much as I can. And with that said, let's jump into it. So I think for the next few videos, I'll probably start jumping into Visualforce and maybe perhaps also Lightning Web Components. But for today, let's go over some Visualforce basics. And I think I'll start with just going over some of the basic tags and how to put them together and all that good stuff. So let's jump into it. Okay, so as is pretty standard by this point, I am using Visual Studio Code. If you aren't familiar with this, I have made a video in the past on how to set yourself up with Visual Studio Code for your development environment. And I'll leave that video linked down somewhere on this page. So feel free to look at that video if you're not familiar with this. But just to kind of catch you guys up to speed real quick, I've already gone ahead and created a standard project with a manifest. And it's already connected to my Trailhead org, as you can see here by all this stuff. I refreshed some S object definitions. So we're good to go. So to start, let's go ahead and open up our command palette by hitting Control-Shift-P if you're on Windows or Command-Shift-P if you're on a Mac. And I'm going to just type in the sfdx command, and we're going to look for one that lets us basically create a Visualforce page. And I'll go ahead and click on that. It's going to ask us for a name, and I'll just call this Visualforce Tag Basics, like so. And we'll just say it's fine to put into the desired directory, which is the default. And there we go. So the command ran, and you'll see here in our project structure, inside the pages directory, we now have our Visualforce page along with the XML. And if you're not familiar with this, the XML just kind of describes a bit about that Visualforce page. If you're still utilizing like the Salesforce Dev Console, some of this stuff might look familiar to you, like the API version. That's something that you would typically see in the Dev Console, like towards the upper left, I believe. And the label that just, describes the name of that page. But this is not really important for now. So let's go ahead and close that, jump into our actual Visualforce page. And you'll see here that we got some standard boilerplate code just to start us off. And I guess I should probably explain my goal with, this upcoming series of videos isn't to show you all the ins and outs of Visualforce. It's just to kind of show, to start with, I'm not an expert, but just to show what I kind of know about Visualforce, and I guess just enough to get you guys started on your own projects if you have an upcoming project for Visualforce, or even just as a refresher. So we've created this Visualforce page via the command, and we got some nice little boilerplate code. You'll see here, if you're not familiar with Visualforce at all, it's essentially just a templating, or rather a markup style of language. And it has some pretty neat features. It has integration towards server-side Apex code as well, which we'll get into in a different video. And we can even use regular HTML tags as well. As you can see here, we have an H1 tag. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything in the middle and just leave this Apex page tag right here. And kind of the neat thing about Visual Studio Code is if you've installed it properly and you have all the proper extensions, you can kind of hover over the tag and it'll kind of give you a description about this. And this is pretty much telling you here that, all Visualforce pages must have this Apex page tag inside of it. And there can only be at most one pair of these tags. So pretty much all your markup is going to be inside of this Apex page tag. And like I said, this is probably going to be a series of videos. So I'm going to start with just the basic tags for today. I won't be jumping into controllers or standard list controllers or custom extension controllers. Those will be their own videos. For now, let's go ahead and go over some simple tags. One tag that I kind of like, or actually before we do that, in our Apex page tag right here, there are some pretty cool things that we can add in here. So if we were to kind of display this page kind of as a replacement to a standard page layout on an account, say as an example, or we're creating a fully fledged application that's very custom, Visualforce still runs within Salesforce, the Salesforce ecosystem, obviously. So kind of as an example, let me go ahead and save this, and let's see if we can actually get it to deploy to our org, and that way we can see what we kind of have to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and right click here, and then I'm going to click on deploy source to org. That's going to run the command, and it's going to try to push this Visualforce page we just created to our trailhead. So let's jump into my Salesforce trailhead org to see that. So back here in our trailhead org, we could to access that Visualforce page, we could go to like the setup and then look for the Visualforce pages. Or if you're lazy like me, I'm pretty sure you can just change the URL, get rid of that, and then type in Apex and then the name of the Visualforce page. Press enter, and that should take you to our Visualforce page. Right now, obviously, it's blank because we haven't actually done anything. And furthermore, the interesting thing is we are in Lightning, or at least right now we're in Lightning, so you see nothing. But if you're still working in Classic, and let me just show you the difference between that. Let me switch to Salesforce Classic. And let's navigate to the exact same URL. You'll see here now that things look a bit different. Because we're in the Classic UI, we still have our navigation bar, the search box, and the little sidebar right here. And I guess it's kind of important to know if you are still in Classic and you still have to develop something in Classic, there are ways of getting rid of this. So as an example, if we jump back into our VS Code, we can add an attribute here and we can say show header. That's one. So this is a Boolean. If we set it to false and we save it and we push it back to our trailhead org and we refresh our page, you'll see here now that we actually have nothing here. It's kind of gone completely. And also there's another tag. This one is called I believe it's sidebar. So we can set this to false. And it looks like for some reason the show header kind of like when we set it to false, it kind of just got rid of everything on the page. But I think if we set sidebar to false, it should still show the header. Let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy the source to org one more time. And let's go ahead and jump into our Visualforce page one more time. And you'll see here that now the sidebar is gone, but we still have the header right here. So just something to know about, the difference between, I guess, Lightning and Classic is that among a bunch of other things, but that's something that might be important to know. So let's jump back into our Visual Studio Code and let's keep going. Okay, so for now, I'm going to get rid of that. And obviously here in the page is also where you would, define your controller, your standard controller, whatever it is. Like I said, that will be a separate video. For now, I just kind of want to go over some of the simple tags. And the first one that I kind of want to go over, and like I said before, in our markup, we can use standard HTML tags like the H1, the header one, the divs, spans, all that good stuff. And let me jump into the documentation to show you guys this. Visualforce actually has many different tags you can use here. You can see here I'm in the documentation, and I'll make sure to add this link to the description box below as well. But you can see there's so many different tags that are available to us for Visualforce. So, I guess like the idea is, sure, you can just use, pure HTML, but by using a lot of these different Apex tags that are part of Visualforce, you get some pretty cool properties and functionality out of the box. So back in our VS Code, the one I wanted to show you guys right after we defined the Apex page tag is the section header like that. So we'll go ahead or actually we just need to close it. We don't need to have an opening and closing tag. And this basically what it allows you to do is have like a nice little, literally a section header at the top of the page. So to make use of it, there is the title attribute, and there's also an optional, I believe, subtitle attribute as well. So as an example, for the title, we'll just say this is the Visualforce tag basics. And then in the subtitle, we'll put something like, this is very cool. I have no idea what else to put. But anyways, we'll keep it at that. So let's go ahead and one more time deploy source to org to kind of show it in our trailhead org. And if we jump into the org and we refresh the page here, you'll see here that at the top we have this little icon, which I'll kind of get into in another video as well. But we have here, this is the title and this is the subtitle right here. And if we jump into Lightning, I actually don't know how it appears, but let's go ahead and try that. And actually, let me open up two tabs. Oh, and you see here that if we're in Lightning, the little icon is gone, but you still have that section header. So kind of interesting output from what we're getting. But anyways, I think for the remainder of this video, I'll probably keep it in just classic, just to keep things simple. I don't want to keep tabbing back and forth. Anytime that I know there's a difference between Lightning and classic, I'll just kind of let you guys know. But I think it might just be easier just so that this video doesn't get so long. So like I said, we'll stick to classic for now. But anyways, okay, let's go ahead and go over some more tags. After we have the section header done, one tag that's very important, and then when I say important, I mean we kind of need this in order to get information from our user and then either save it or process it into our database, and that is the form tag. And if you're familiar with HTML and JavaScript and all that, it's pretty much just a form tag. But it's the Visualforce type of tags that gives us some pretty cool functionality as well. So let me go ahead and style this a little bit. So I'll indent this and that. And then in here, the form tag can take a few attributes. I think you can use like the ID attribute if you need to like target it in the JavaScript or something. Again, that will be its own separate video in the future. But inside of here, you can define a bunch of different tags that the user can, submit information to, and then you can process it in like an Apex controller or something. So in here, what I want to do, just for simplicity's sake, is define another tag, and this is called the Apex page block. And the page block, what it is, just think of it kind of like an empty container that inside of it you will have a bunch of information related to this page block. So like, I guess like a div essentially. And this page block can take an attribute of title, so we can give it a name. And I will say this will be called tag basics, like so. And then in here, we can use another tag called the page block section. And this, what it allows us to do is create within the page block, have like, I guess like essentially another div, but this div will contain information related to just a certain section, which is, I guess, why it's called the page block section. And I do apologize for not having more specific, I guess, information about these. Like, it's like pretty much what it comes down to at the end of the day. They're just a bunch of divs. I'm pretty sure that's what they get rendered as. We can check that out a little bit later. But I think even if you hover over it, there's no information on this. So that sucks. But anyways, so the page block section, that itself can also take in a title. So we'll say for this page block section, the title of this is about page block section, because that's what we're learning about now. And then in here, to make things even more fun, we can use a tag called the Apex page block section item. And essentially, once we get down to this level, if I guess we're following the semantically correct Visualforce markup language syntax or whatever, here is where we could define like our output label or an input text that the user can put some information into. And I think a caveat as well, you can only have 2 tags in here. So as an example, to finally kind of start wrapping things up for this video, let's go ahead and define a tag that we can actually see and put some information into. So since we don't really have a controller set up to this, we'll just use an input text, which essentially you would use an input text anytime you want to take information from the user, but that piece of information isn't, I guess, necessarily directly tied to a field in your Salesforce org. So as an example, let's say we were creating a Visualforce page that basically is going to create like a custom version of an account page layout. If you were asking the user to like basically give us information about, an account field, you would want to use a different tag, and that would be called the input field tag. And what that would let you do is essentially connect that to the field itself on the account record. But in this case, we don't have a controller set, so we can't really do it yet. And anyhow, the input text field is very important if you want to take information from the user and kind of like process it or verify it beforehand before pushing it to your database. So with all of that said, the input text, you don't need to have opening and closing brackets. So we can just define it like this. And so the input text, there's a few attributes that are important to know. There's the value attribute. And right now we won't be able to use it because we don't have a controller defined to this Apex page. But essentially this lets us pull or push some information to an Apex variable in our controller class. And also there's the ID attribute, which is just an identifier. And this is actually pretty useful. So right now, if we were to push this to production, or rather our trailhead org, you would see like a little input text, a little input area in our page where a user can type in some values, but they wouldn't know what it's for. And that's because we need to actually define some label. So if we can use the tag output label like so. And let me go ahead and close this off like that. And the output label takes, well, there's a few attributes, but probably the most important ones for now are the value. And this is like the actual text that you would see next to this input text. And we'll call this like, how are you or something. And then there's the for attribute. And this is basically linking it to the input text. So we would give this hello for the value, linking it to this input text via the ID. So always when you want to define an output label for an input text or an input field, ensure that the for and the ID are equal to each other. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll right click and we'll hit deploy source to org one more time. And it looks like we have an error, and let's see what that error is. Oh, and it looks like I forgot to use a terminating tag right there. So let's go ahead and deploy source to org one more time. And now it's success. Let's jump into our Salesforce and let's click refresh. And then you'll see here now that we have this page block. Within here in this blue, this is the page block section. This is the output label, and then this is the input text. And now I can type in here like, I'm great. How are you? Or something like that. Unfortunately, we can't do much with this. There's no save button or cancel or anything like that. So, it's pretty useless, but it kind of shows you, all these tags kind of like taking shape. Let's go through a few more before we kind of wrap it up for the day. So back in here, we've done the page block section, a page block section item. Something cool for the page block section. There are a few more attributes that I kind of want to go over. There is the columns, if I can spell, the columns attribute. And this basically specifies like how many essentially columns can you have before any of your page block sections kind of wrap over to the next row. So if we put, 2 as like the maximum amount, and then if we kind of go ahead and copy this right here. So I'll copy this and then let's paste it 2 more times. And then let's change this to, we'll just say 2 because I'm very original. So we'll change this to 2. We'll change that to 2. And then this will be 3, 3, and 3. So essentially what I'm getting at is we've created three different page block sections. And we've told our page block section, we created 3 page block section items. And we've told our page block section that we can only have 2 columns. So you'll see here there'll be 1 row with 2 items and then a second row with 1 item because we've only allowed for 2 columns. So that kind of explains that. Before we go ahead and push it to production, there's one other tag, and that tag is called collapsible, and it takes a Boolean. So we'll say this is false. And essentially, if we jump into our org real quick, you'll notice here by default there is this little caret right here. If we click on it, it basically closes up that section. And by giving that Boolean a false for the collapsible, you're basically taking away that functionality. So let's go ahead and push our code to the org and see those results. So I'll go ahead and hit save, and I'll hit deploy source to org, and it looks like we have another error. Let's see what that is. And after some debugging, it looks like we're having the error, probably because I was using numbers for the ID or the for. I'm not too sure what that error was. It wasn't really giving me much of an actual error message, so I just changed the values to actual letters instead, and I was able to deploy source to org. So let's go ahead and jump into our org one last time, and let's go ahead and hit refresh. And then now we see here, like I mentioned before, we set our page block section to be 2 columns. And because we did that, well, now, we have 3 different inputs with their output labels, but because column is 2, this one gets put onto a different row. So yeah, I think that kind of explains that a little bit. And I think the video is kind of running a little long, so I'll kind of cap it here. I know we didn't really cover anything groundbreaking or anything new, but that kind of goes over some of the simple tags. In the next video, we'll probably start working with the controller, so we can now, start talking a little bit more about the input fields and output fields and fields, that are tied to an actual object or record. So that should be good. Like I said at the start of this video, if you have any comments or suggestions down below, or any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave them down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.